So in an earlier video, we were looking at some lines of the Caro-Kann Advance Variation, where white plays knight takes f3 instead of either c3 or taking on c5. And we recommended a line where we're just going ahead and taking on d4 immediately. And I did a video showing that that line can actually be quite dangerous for black. And so I started investigating some alternative ideas, and I wanted to share those with you. And I think I found some things that are more interesting to play. So stick around and check out some ideas that we have that I think are going to give you better odds of getting into a complicated game where you have some more winning chances. So let's go ahead and dive in here. So we've got our first initial move on the board, and this is a game that I played against a strong IM who's a coach of mine, and I got a really interesting game. C6, D4, and now after D5, E5, C5. And now the move we're looking at is knight F3. Now, the Caro-Kann repertoire that we're promoting is just capturing here immediately. And as I suggested in an earlier video, those lines can be a little bit dangerous. And so I started investigating this knight c6 instead. And I think this has some nice ideas to it. The main point, at least from my perspective, is that I'm giving white an opportunity to play c3 when we just transpose to like one of the favorite lines that we should all be encountering. We're just taking here. Oops, we're just taking here. We're moving this bishop out. We're attacking d4. We have a clear plan. We know exactly what we're doing. The other option that white has is to play bishop out to b5. And here I do also recommend that we go ahead and capture on d4, and then whether they take back with the knight, which place we're playing bishop d7, or they take back with the queen when we play e6, we're again transposing back into the repertoire. The only difference is after this knight c6 is we have this new option, which is to play d takes c. And I think that this, while maybe not the most common response you're going to get, leads to the most interesting play. The first thing to note is white is not going to be able to hang on to that pawn, at least not without paying a pretty severe cost. And we're going to take a look at that. So bishop g4 is the recommended move that I think that is the best and gives the most sort of fighting play. c3 is almost a forced response here. C3 is getting ready to play this knight out, or sorry, play the pawn to b5. And it also means that we can't take here immediately because of this queen a4 check. So that's kind of a dual purpose of c3. So after c3, we're going to hit e6. And now bishop to e3 hanging onto this pawn because we were threatening to get it back. And I'm going to demonstrate some ideas where white attempts to hang on to this pawn and doesn't just give it back. So here, a6. This is an important move to play. A really, really important move to play. So the reason why we're playing a6 is that we want to capture this pawn, but we don't want to allow any obnoxious checks here, or we want to be able to come back. So for example, if we were to immediately try to grab this pawn, well, this is a horrible blunder. Queen a4 check, and if we try to come back, well, the bishop is just hanging, and if we don't come back, well, we got to move our king, and they have knight takes knight instead, so we can't allow this. We're not ready to take this pawn just yet. We have to prepare it a bit more with a6. From here, the best move is actually to play knight to d2, which is sort of a strange move because it does just give this pawn back. So after knight d2, we can play here. This check is an option, but we have this queen d7. And the point is that we're attacking the queen back, and you can't come here. And after something like queen takes, we can just drop this back. We're putting pressure on this. We've got our pawn back. B4 is going to be forced. We're going to put the knight onto e7. We're going to play g6, put the bishop on the long diagonal, and be prepared to counter-strike with b6 and a5. And I think we have quite a comfortable game and even a teeny bit of an edge here. So we should be happy if this happens. And this is probably the best play that white can do once they've gone into this line of capturing the pawn. There are a couple more direct ways of attempting to hang on to the pawn. So, for example, bishop to d4 looks like it's going to hang on to everything. But this gives us a way to transpose the position in quite a comfortable advantage. We just grab here. Queen takes makes the most sense, like by far. And now we hit with this b6. And the point is that after captures, we have takes, queen takes, and we're forking these two pawns. There's not a good way to hang on to both of them. I mean, you could try to play this, but, this is a good way to lose your queen. So knight c3, and then we can just grab this. They have to play here, and several moves are possible. g6, planning to attack the pawn this way, but I like this idea of playing h4, and say a normal looking move, rook d1, we can just play h4 directly. After this trade, we're quite happy. You can't take with this pawn because here. But we can just go ahead and we're going to grab this pawn no matter what. And we're actually just going to be up a clean couple central pass pawns. This would be a fantastic way for things to go. So we're not really worried about this bishop to f4. You just need to remember this cool idea of taking on f3, playing b6, taking on d4, and this little fork, and we're doing quite nice. So in this game, my opponent, instead of playing bishop to d4, tried this queen a4 idea, which is setting up a pin and defending the e5 pawn sort of indirectly here. Of course, we can take, and we've ruined the structure, and we probably already have compensation for the pawn, even without anything else. I chose to play knight to e7. My point is I want to go to f4 and put pressure here, and the knight just sits really pretty here. Maybe I will play g6, attack this guy, queen c7. Lots of normal looking moves. Point is you still cannot defend this pawn. So for example, say bishop d3, normal looking move. We always just have this maneuver of queen to d7. And if you try to play f4, doesn't matter. I just take the pawn. I'm hitting the queen. You grab back. We come here. And everything's looking nice. We still have this idea of g6, putting this on the long diagonal. We have this knight perhaps coming here. Our knight's already putting pressure here. If we get a knight to c, if we get this knight to c6, there's already pressure on b4, so a5 maybe comes with a problem. And again, we're slightly for choice. We have the cleaner pawn structure. Now, granted, white does have the bishop pair, but I think the pawn structure more than offsets for that. So something like b4, g6 comes, and yeah, we have a pretty healthy game. We're blunted this diagonal. f5 is a strong post for us. There is no f5 from white coming. This would be a really comfortable way to play. So going back, instead of bishop d3, my opponent played f4 immediately, which is actually a bit of a mistake, and we have a significant advantage now. The point is we can play knight to f5, and we're threatening this guy out of the gate, and there's not really a good place for it to go. I mean, say the bishop tries to come to f4, hoping that we're going to capture and come here. Well, now this comes, and this pawn's incredibly soft. You can't defend it in any way. I mean, try to come back to e3. Well, now I can grab it, and thanks to this pin, we're just gonna win the piece outright. So you can't go for that. And if we're threatening to grab here, because we're threatening to take this bishop and then this pawn and be totally happy, b4 does seem kind of forced. Here, I had an idea, and it's the right idea. I executed in slightly the wrong order. So I chose to take here first, which is fine, not a problem, and then captures, and then I played queen to h4. Again, you can see the eval bar larks the way I'm playing. There's just a slightly more accurate way to play it. And my point was I wanted to play g5, but I wanted the queen outside, so I'm already attacking this pawn. It's actually a bit better to play g5 immediately. The point being that if you make some sort of natural looking move, like say knight here, well, now I can capture, and after you take back, this check comes, and we're just going to win this pawn outright, and we've prevented this b5 counterattack. Because right now, if you try to play b5 after we play g5, well, nobody cares. We just grab it, and you got to move the queen, and then we're capturing here. We're giving a check. Whereas the move order that I played in, I allowed b5, and things got wild. So queen h4 check. The king's got to move. I don't really want to give this check. It's probably fine, but the bishop just blocks, and then like we're kind of wondering, what are we doing here? So instead, I followed up with my idea g5, which is good. It makes a lot of sense, but it allows this b5 maneuver, and this is where things get hairy. It's difficult. I chose to play here takes, but this is not the most accurate because apparently the king can just move out of the way, and I don't know. I mean, king c2 is a hard move to make here. It's still an equal position. It's better to play knight takes e5 first with a similar idea. After this check, we can move our king out of the way. We're going to look at a position very, very similar to this in just a moment. But after b5, I chose to take here. And the point is you can't take my knight because this check comes and I pick up the queen. So we've got a lot of tactics that are kind of about this queen hanging. So instead, after I took, he took back. And now I grabbed here. Kind of a similar move order. And I I'm just winning. Not winning. I mean, I'm significantly better, and the eval continues to grow. The point being that after the natural takes here, um, I chose to play knight back to c6, thinking that after takes, this knight is nicely defending the promotion square. But I have kind of a sick move here. Just king to e7. This is a really sweet idea. The point being that, like, well, you can't take my knight because this is still hanging. You can't take this pawn because this is hanging. And yeah, okay, fine. You can grab here. I grab. You make a queen. So what? This is lights out. This is a check. This is coming in. This is coming in with threats. This has got to be just over. King c2. Bishop h6 immediately. Just threatening here. Also threatening here. Sorry, not here, but here. What are you going to do? Queen to b7? I mean, fine. Take the rook. Take a rook. You might as well like die on an empty stomach, right? Because this check comes, this comes, and after this check, you're almost out of ideas because you got to come here. This is a mate. So this would have been a nicer way to have handled it. This king e7, but this is, that's nuts. I played knight back to c6, and then after this bishop move, now I gave this check. And we're still doing slightly better. The king comes here, which surprised me because, I mean, it's the best move, but like, I did not expect this because it just allows me to pick up the piece with tempo, even, it seems like. But so I expected instead something like here. But now after like bishop takes c5, well, this check is coming, and this is quite problematic. And maybe this check will come at some point as well. And so say something like this, and I don't know. King's got to come out of the way, and we can even just castle. And you want to take here? That's fine. We're covering this square. We're still covering this square. You want to give checks? No problem. You don't have a dark square bishop, so our king's going to set nicely on this h8 square. This would have been a nice way to go for us, but it kind of explains why white chose to allow this with king to d1. And so I gave the check. Again, probably better to play this king e7 just to get out of the shenanigans here so we can get this bishop out of the way, connect the rooks, and we're doing fine. Instead, I gave this check here, and now the best that I really have is a perpetual if white plays it correctly. Which, to play it correctly, they need to play like this, and we really shouldn't take back the pawn. I mean, we can. After takes, king e7, we have this check, we come out here. This is going to be a perpetual. And it's similar if we go the other way as well. So, for example, instead of taking here, after, this is the way they did take, but after taking, if we play king to e7, we're going to get a similar position, this check, and we got to come out, and we're probably going to end up in a similar situation. Takes, this is complicated beyond wildness, but it's still going to be a perpetual. We're going to get the rook in. This is still like an absolute zeros position. It's totally chaotically nuts. Instead, a takes was played, which lets me play here and then get this new queen, and now I go to e7. And we're still doing slightly better. Takes the bishop, and I give this check, but it was better to give this check instead. I mean, this is wild. Both kings are like totally nuts. We've gotten back all of our material here. It's still 4 pawns on 4 pawns. We are up in exchange for the moment, but it's not clear we're going to stay there. But after king to b3, just rook takes f4, and our king is going to set nicely on f6. We're going to be able to play this move. We have a phenomenal position. We're up material. No real attack. Our king is somehow the safe one. Surprising. But this would have been a nice way to go. Instead, I went for checks. And here we have a perpetual, which should be a perpetual. But here, white chose to play on in a position that is just, now he's lost. But it's not so easy. So I take, comes here, and I looked at the winning line here. Actually looked at 2 winning lines and then played a losing one. The line I wanted to play was takes, we give this check, we're hitting here with this check, you've got a block, and then I just wanted to play takes, and then here, and we're picking up this pawn, we're up a clean exchange, this pawn's certainly going to fall. This looks pretty clean, and this is not terribly difficult to calculate. But when I was getting down to those wee last seconds, I got concerned of what happens if he takes here. Do I have anything? The answer is yes, absolutely do. We can play queen to d4. The point is we want to try to pick this pawn up with check. So king to b3 sort of got to happen. But now we give this e3, and king can try to come to b4, and we can just weasel around until eventually this pawn falls with check, and we have a much better position, but it's still complicated. And with not much time on the clock, I didn't go for this because I thought I was playing a much safer option. Turns out if I do want just a clean, safe, no frills option, I can either play queen takes or rook takes, which I looked at both of those. I don't really know why I dismissed them. I played rook to e4. My thinking was that after this check, I would be able to hide here, and there was no check on the e4 square, and I could eventually snake my way out and bring this bishop in, get the rook into play, and everything would be great. It fails for one idea, and it's because of this check. Not so much of a problem here, but now this check. And now I got nothing. I'm just SOL. I can't come either here or here because this check is mate in either direction. So I'm forced to play e7. And here I knew the game was over, but I went ahead and let it play out. Here, this is nice. And we just get mated on the side of the board. But this was a wild and chaotic game. And I think that exactly the kind of thing we would like to see. It gives us opportunities to try to play for the win and get positions that we're going to be more familiar with, especially when we get these greedy people who are taking on c5. They're going to try to hold the pawn, and we get to punish them for it. That's really like the most fun way to play chess. And I would encourage all of you guys to give this a try, see what you think about. As always, your next step, learn more about the Caro-Kann. There'll be a video link here for you guys to check. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.